This is AM 650's The Law Show with Sterling Fox. Now back to the show.
Good to have you with us today. Scott Stanley and Kevin Gorley are lawyers with Murphy Battista, a personal injury law firm here in Vancouver. We've been talking about a lot of issues surrounding personal injuries and traffic accidents and roadside suspensions. We're really bouncing all around the park here, Scott and Kevin. It's great to have you back with us. Want to talk about, we're back to the initial meeting. You've been in an accident of some kind. You've determined that perhaps it would be smart to talk to a lawyer. And then Scott interjected moments ago, if there is a concussion involved, you need a lawyer. There are no second guessing yourself. There are no ifs, ands, or buts. If you were hit, you're involved in an accident, and there's a concussion, you need a lawyer, period.
That's my personal view. Absolutely. If you had a concussion or there's suspicion that you may have had a concussion, you need to get a lawyer right away. The reality of it is about 95% of people that have a concussion will make a full recovery. Mm-hmm. But for those that don't, those are the most controversial cases you're ever going to see. And the case that Kevin and I did earlier involving the doctor was a concussion.
Right.
And they're controversial because unlike more serious brain injuries, there's no imaging. You can scan them, you can do an MRI, it'll show nothing.
Right.
It's completely subjective. And one of the key things that you need to prove in order for there to be a concussion, you have to establish in the evidence that there was a period of confusion or disorientation immediately afterwards. So the person has to have a gap in their memory or some sort of problem like that. The problem is that if you don't get a lawyer right away, you'll start talking with ICBC.
Well, that's the drill, isn't it? You get involved in an accident, you got to go to one of those, get the car, however, to one of those claim centers and get it in there and have the adjuster do the drill. And in the course of that first encounter with ICBC, Scott, you are going to be asked to sign something, and you're suggesting don't sign anything.
Well, there are some certain things you do have to sign. You got to sign the claim form, but if you've got a concussion, talk to your lawyer, and they'll tell you what you sign and what you don't sign.
Right.
The thing you don't want to sign is a statement, and what the adjuster will do is they'll want to determine what your level of consciousness was or your awareness was after the accident, and they'll ask you what happened. And people aren't being asked, what do you remember? Because if you ask someone what happens, typically what they'll say is, well, I was hit, I got out of my car, I did this, I did that. And it looks like their memory and report of events is continuous.
Right.
But when we sit them down or their doctors sit them down and we say, well, what do you remember? And they'll often say, well, I was hit. The next thing I was outside of my car. And then my next memory is being at home.
Right. Right.
That's a lot different than what you'll see in the statement. And I've had this issue litigated over and over again where the initial statement to ICBC is used to show that there was a complete history of events.
Why doesn't ICBC, Kevin, just ask you point blank, what do you remember from the event in which you were involved?
Well, they want evidence that will be helpful to their case. So they want evidence that will be helpful in showing that the individual wasn't injured, that in that circumstance that they didn't suffer a concussion. They want evidence that they can use against the individual. It is true that that you are required to give a basic statement of the facts of an accident to ICBC as your insurance company, but what you're required to give them are the basic details of where the accident happened and that injuries were suffered.
And how soon does that declaration have to be made?
That has to be done within 30 days of the actual accident.
Okay, all right.
But unlike the 2-year limitation period that Scott mentioned previously, those requirements are not as drop dead. Those are not as set in stone. You do need to make reasonable efforts to give that statement, but you should often talk to a lawyer first before doing that, so you make sure you don't prejudice your own case when you do so.
Yeah, because even if, and this is the signing something, I'm back to that, Scott, because I'm a little concerned. What must I sign if I go to ICBC and say, I've been in an accident, this is here are the facts. What do I sign? Today's date and my name, and what else am I required to admit to?
Well, the vast majority of times you can go to ICBC and sign everything and no harm will come to you, right?
Okay.
But the things that you have to sign is you have to fill in a claim form so that you can get the accident benefits or the no-fault benefits. That must be signed.
Okay.
Right. But again, what are you signing? What information is in it?
Yeah.
I mean, if you've had a concussion and you're not listing the concussion as the injury, you have to sign it, but you want to make sure it's accurate. So it goes back to my thesis that you don't need to hire a lawyer, but everybody involved in an accident should talk to one. The problem is...
Just to find out where you stand.
Right.
And what
Right.
is likely to happen.
Right. The problem is a lot of times when you talk to a lawyer the first time, it leads to a retainer when you don't need to hire one.
Right.
A lot of lawyers are not, some do, but I would say the vast majority of lawyers, when they get that first phone call, they're going to try to sign the client up.
Right.
When they probably don't need a lawyer. They just need a little bit of direction about what they sign, what they don't sign.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to sign the claim form. Beyond that, you don't have to sign anything else.
Okay. So, but if you're rattled, Kevin, and you really do feel, your life has been changed, I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's not the same as it was before the accident, I don't want to sign anything. I don't want to jeopardize anything. Can you not sign anything?
Well, what you can always do is essentially put that off a little bit, especially if the accident was yesterday and ICBC's calling and saying you need to come in and sign the form tomorrow.
Right.
Especially if you're shaken, if you're not sure of what's happening. There's no harm in saying, I just can't do it right now. If you need to get some advice, get some advice. But it doesn't need to be done that first day, that second day. Even if they're calling saying, no, we need you to come in, you can always put that off and get a bit of advice first.
Okay. So the secret is take a deep breath and don't be intimidated by the way the game is usually played. Usually, if you can get the car, you get in the car and you go right to the claim center. You get a file number and you're off to the races and, it gets done. But that may not apply every time.
Like 90% of the time, ICBC is going to be very helpful for these people.
Sure.
But 10% of the time, that's not going to be the case. And why risk it?
Right.
Why risk it?
All right. So when it comes time, if you're in a traffic accident of any kind, and particularly where there's injury, and if you are fine, but the other person is obviously banged up, that would also, I think, be a good time to call a lawyer, yes?
Not really. I'll let Kevin take this one.
Well, if you don't have any injuries,
right,
then ICBC is going to appoint a lawyer to defend you, assuming that your insurance is in place and that you haven't done anything wrong, you haven't been drinking, that sort of thing.
Right, sure.
If you've got considerations about that, if you don't have a license, if you've been drinking,
you're in trouble.
You certainly need a lawyer then.
Right.
But if it's just a routine accident, somebody else has been injured, you're not, ICBC will appoint a lawyer to defend you and act on your behalf.
Interesting stuff. Lots of more information available. Our guests are Scott Stanley and Kevin Gorley, and they and their colleagues at Murphy Battista LLP in Vancouver are here to serve, and highly recommend a call. And that first call, that first inquiry is still free. Always good to remember. Great to see you guys, Scott and Kevin. Lovely to see you again. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks for having us.
We must do this again soon.
Thanks, Sterling.
That's it for The Law Show for today on AM 650.